Psychology of War and Conflict. Artificial intelligence in modern warfare. Is AI choosing who dies? While world leaders make decisions that determine the fates of millions, their brains operate with a neural architecture developed 200,000 years ago to manage tribal groups of 150 people. This incompatibility between ancestral biology and modern geopolitical reality is not a philosophical metaphor. It is a neurological fact documented in functional magnetic resonance imaging (fMRI) laboratories around the world. When Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine, when Benjamin Netanyahu authorized operations in Gaza, when Xi Jinping calculated moves on Taiwan, their amygdalae processed abstract geopolitical threats exactly as they would process immediate physical predators. Political neuroscience reveals that leaders isolated by decades of absolute power experience literal atrophy in neural circuits responsible for processing contradictory feedback. They don't start out irrational. They become progressively incapable of updating beliefs when surrounded only by confirmation. MRI studies of authoritarian leaders show reduced activation in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area critical for empathy and consideration of long-term consequences, while simultaneously showing increased activation in regions processing status and dominance. John Mearsheimer argues that states act out of rational self-interest in an anarchic system, but neuroscience adds a critical layer. This rationality is severely limited by how primate brains assess risk, status, and group survival. Individual cognitive biases multiply when processed by entire populations. In Israel and Palestine, generations grow up in neurologically distinct parallel realities. Researchers at Princeton University documented that Israelis and Palestinians viewing identical images of Gaza activate completely different neural networks. Israelis process through narratives of existential defense, Palestinians through networks associated with injustice and victimization. It's not a question of who is objectively correct, but a demonstration that humans do not process objective reality. We process reality filtered by experiences, fears, and tribal needs for belonging. Russia and Ukraine operate in informational echo chambers so hermetic that citizens on each side exhibit incompatible brain activation patterns when discussing the same conflict. Magnetic resonance imaging systems reveal that factual contradictions do not even reach conscious processing, being automatically rejected by limbic structures protecting group identity. Historical trauma is not just memory, it is biological modification transmitted generationally. Studies from the University of Haifa have shown that descendants of Holocaust survivors exhibit epigenetic alterations in genes that regulate cortisol, the stress hormone. Palestinians under occupation exhibit identical patterns, with 73% of children showing symptoms of chronic post-traumatic stress, according to research from Birzeit University. When these children become adults making political decisions, they will operate with brains literally restructured by trauma, conditioned to perceive constant existential threat. Cycles of revenge are not moral failings, they are predictable neurological consequences. Artificial intelligence is transforming this psychological dynamic at unprecedented speed and scale. In April 2024, an Israeli system called Lavender made life or death decisions in Gaza with only 20 seconds of human supervision per target. Developed by the 8200 Intelligence Unit, it processes mass surveillance, communication patterns, geographic movements, and social media behavior, assigning threat scores to Gaza's male population. The military established a 10% threshold, meaning that a 90% chance of being an innocent civilian still puts an individual on a target list. When algorithms make decisions and on-screen numbers replace human faces, the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for moral conflict and guilt, simply doesn't fire in the same way in operators. Responsibility is diluted through layers of code and automated protocols. Soldiers sleep with a curiously clear conscience because human neural architecture hasn't evolved to feel the moral weight of machine-mediated decisions. The Pentagon invested $8 billion in Project Maven, using computer vision to automatically analyze drone footage. A leaked Department of Defense document from 2023 revealed that autonomous systems already operate in nominal human approval mode, where operational pace makes substantive review impossible. Military psychologists discovered a devastating paradox. The more automated the system, the less post-traumatic stress operators report, but they demonstrate signs of moral dissociation persisting after service, manifesting in difficulties with empathy and ethical decision-making in civilian life. China makes no secret of its ambitions. The Artificial Intelligence Development Plan sets an explicit goal of global supremacy by 2030, with military applications as a priority. The Linker system coordinates swarms of 120 autonomous drones, making collective decisions using swarm intelligence, adapting to countermeasures in real time, each carrying explosives equivalent to grenades. US military simulated defense against such attacks, and the results remain classified, but analysts describe the scenarios as deeply concerning. Information warfare has reached surreal dimensions with language models. Leaked documents from a Russian operation in 2023 revealed the use of GPT-4 equivalent models to generate thousands of fake personas on social media, each with consistent stories and the ability to engage in complex debates. Unlike primitive bots, these entities pass conversational Turing tests. You may be debating with one right now without knowing it. China implements information pollution on an industrial scale, using generative AI to flood unfavorable narratives with such massive volume that factual truth drowns in noise. It's not about convincing someone of a specific lie, it's about making the cognitive cost of discerning truth so high that brains, conserving mental energy, simply give up and revert to tribal biases. NATO confirmed in 2024 that AI-assisted operational planning systems have been in use since 2022 in the Ukrainian conflict. Algorithms process multiple intelligences, predicting Russian movements with a precision that commanders describe as frightening. Ukraine, using a customized Palantir platform, coordinates artillery, reducing the time between detection and engagement from minutes to seconds. Russia responded with Okrestny, a system using machine learning to optimize barrages based on Ukrainian counterfire. It's a real-time algorithmic evolutionary race with human lives as selective pressure. The psychological impact is insidious. Soldiers report unique existential anxiety, a feeling of being constantly analyzed by non-human intelligences. Military psychiatrists document a new pattern, not just memories of violence, but anguish related to powerlessness against automated systems. When autonomous drones track, there is no negotiation or mercy, only relentless code logic. Civilians in Gaza have developed pathological hypervigilance to the sound of drones operating 24 hours a day. Neuropsychological studies show that chronic exposure to algorithmic threats produces distinct stress patterns with a higher incidence of dissociation and feelings of dehumanization. Putin sitting at the end of an absurdly long table is a physical manifestation of psychological isolation, defining prolonged authoritarian leadership. Stanford studies show a consistent pattern. The longer in absolute power, the greater the deterioration in the ability to process contradictory feedback. Decades surrounded only by those who confirm beliefs have literally atrophied neural circuits responsible for updating. When everyone always agrees, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex receives less activation. Mearsheimer predicted in 2014 that NATO expansion would provoke a Russian response. But strategic analysis ignores a critical psychological component. Putin not only calculates national interests, he processes NATO through a neural filter shaped by the perceived humiliation of the Soviet dissolution, the institutionalized paranoia of the KGB, and the grandiose narrative of imperial restoration. Resonances of narcissistic leaders show reduced activation in empathy regions and increased activation in status processing. The decision to invade was strategic, but profoundly psychological, a product of a mind that no longer distinguishes national interest from personal ego. Xi Jinping operates under psychological pressure that Westerners rarely appreciate. RAND Corporation algorithms analyzing linguistic patterns have identified an intensification of inevitable reunification language since 2019. The Communist Party's legitimacy rests on a narrative of reversing a century of humiliation. Taiwan represents an intolerable symbolic wound to a mentality that defines national success by restoring historical glory. Political neuroscientists note that collective identities activate the same brain regions as personal identity. Attacking Taiwan is not simply a military objective, it is completing a narrative defining who they are as a people. Xi also faces temporal pressure. At 71 years old, his historical legacy requires action within a limited biological window. Personal urgency combined with increasing military capability creates a dangerous convergence. Israeli forces use the Alchemist system, analyzing sentiment on Palestinian social networks in real time, identifying changes in collective mood preceding violence. The algorithm processes millions of posts, detecting linguistic patterns that human analysts would miss. China is implementing an incomparably more sophisticated version through a social credit system integrated with facial recognition. In the context of Taiwan, China is already simulating influence campaigns. Leaked documents show operations where thousands of AI-generated personas infiltrate Taiwanese digital spaces, gradually normalizing pro-unification narratives. It's not a sudden attack, it's years of psychological conditioning mediated by algorithms continuously learning which messages resonate with which demographics. When Finland abandoned 75 years of neutrality to join NATO in April 2023, it wasn't economic spreadsheets that decided it. It was primal fear etched in the collective memory of the Winter War against Stalin. 5 million Finns saw Russian tanks in Ukraine, and their brains processed an existential threat identical to that faced by their grandparents. Social neuroscience demonstrates that nations function as enlarged tribal organisms. The need to belong to a protective group is an evolutionary impulse, not a rational choice. Echoes of Scandinavian populations during a crisis showed massive activation in the amygdala and insula processing visceral fear, not the prefrontal cortex's cost-benefit analysis. Military alliances appear as agreements between states, but they are manifestations of tribal psychology on a scale of millions. Declassified NATO meeting documents reveal groupthink. When Kennedy faced the Cuban Missile Crisis, his brother noted that a room of brilliant people converged on a dangerous consensus without adequate debate. Analyses showed that pressure for conformity nearly caused nuclear war. Modern NATO faces an identical dynamic, amplified. 31 members create massive conformist pressure. When a majority defines Russia as an existential threat, individual dissent becomes psychologically costly. Studies from the University of Michigan show that social rejection activates the same regions as physical pain. Diplomats are not immune. Pressure to conform to decisions about Ukraine creates an environment where moderate options are neurologically suppressed before they reach conscious debate. Palantir developed the Maven alliance system for NATO, analyzing the stability of relationships between members using natural language processing in diplomatic communications, voting patterns, and sentiment on social media. The algorithm assigns defection risk scores. During the 2022 energy crisis, when Hungary blocked sanctions, the system had predicted with 84% confidence 3 weeks in advance. AI not only observes, but the military admits that its outputs influence diplomatic coercion strategies. If the algorithm predicts that a country may abandon consensus, pressure is applied preemptively. Even more frightening are simulations of nuclear escalation. Los Alamos operates ARAC, which since 2021 has integrated AI modules simulating decision-making by leaders under extreme stress. Researchers have fed decades of historical crises, psychological patterns, and game theory into creating models that replicate how Putin, Biden, and Xi would respond to nuclear provocations. Results remain classified, but scientists have published papers obliquely referencing a disturbing finding. In 47% of scenarios, escalation to tactical nuclear use occurred not through strategic calculation, but through groupthink combined with normalcy bias, where brains assume the future will be like the recent past. Because nuclear weapons haven't been used since 1945, minds unconsciously treat future use as improbable, even when logic indicates otherwise. Stanislav Petrov in 1983 saw Soviet systems indicating an American nuclear attack. Protocol demanded immediate retaliation. He decided the sensors had erred, literally saving civilization. It was a machine error. Today, systems are infinitely more sophisticated. Russia operates Perimeter Dead Hand, a semi-autonomous system that can order nuclear retaliation even if leadership is decapitated. The United States keeps details classified, but leaked documents reveal that warning systems use machine learning to distinguish real launches from false positives. Reliability has improved, but introduces new risk. If modern AI detects a signature matching 98% to a real launch, how much time does a human have to decide? 6 minutes between detection and impact, cognitively impossible for adequate analysis. Game theory suggests that the prisoner's dilemma between nuclear powers requires communication and trust, but algorithms optimizing deterrence push both sides into a hair-on-the-trigger posture. You probably think World War III won't happen in your lifetime. That thought isn't rational analysis, it's normalcy bias protecting sanity. Brains that constantly anticipate existential catastrophe develop paralyzing anxiety, so evolution equipped us with a mechanism for discounting abstract future risks. It works for everyday stress, but it's potentially suicidal for nuclear risks where a single mistake ends civilization. In February 2014, Mearsheimer published an article predicting exactly what would happen in Ukraine. It wasn't mysticism, it was a cold reading of structural incentives in an anarchic system. He argued that NATO expansion would provoke an inevitable Russian military response. Western politicians completely ignored him. 8 years later, Russian tanks crossed the border precisely as predicted, and those same politicians expressed shock. It wasn't a failure of intelligence, it was a neural failure. Berkeley neuroscientists identify illusory optimism bias, where the ventromedial prefrontal cortex systematically overestimates positive probabilities and discounts negative warnings. It's not stupidity, it's brain architecture that evolved because excessive optimism produced action where pessimism produced paralysis. It works in an individual context, it's catastrophic in nuclear geopolitics. When Mearsheimer presented his analysis before 2022, audiences reacted with visible discomfort. Brain scans of people confronted with pessimistic but well-founded predictions show activation in the anterior cingulate cortex processing cognitive dissonance, followed by suppression through emotional regulation networks. Literally, the brains of politicians listening to Mearsheimer actively work to reject information contradicting their preferred narrative of a peacefully expanding liberal order. Offensive realism starts from simple premises. States in an anarchic system can never be certain of the intentions of others. Therefore, rational beings seek to maximize relative power. Humans hate this logic because it activates regions associated with threat and zero-sum competition. We prefer narratives of cooperation, moral progress, which activate reward circuits releasing dopamine. In March 2022, a deepfake video of Zelensky instructing soldiers to surrender surfaced on social media. The quality was uneven, with subtly desynchronized facial movements. It was a fake generated by a Russian system using GANs. Ukraine quickly debunked it, but 23% of those exposed retained doubt about its authenticity. Neuroscience explains, when brains process visual information, initial activation occurs in the visual cortex before higher cognition assesses veracity. False memory is neurologically planted before critical thinking intervenes. Even after conscious correction, the neural trace remains, creating persistent ambiguity. Russian, Chinese, and Western propagandists know this and systematically exploit it. Operation Internet Research Agency seems primitive compared to current capabilities. Documents from the Russian company Struktura in 2023 reveal an Infopol system using the Russian equivalent of GPT-4 to generate content in 63 languages. These are not generic posts. AI analyzes psychological profiles through browsing history, creating personalized messages optimized for specific cognitive vulnerabilities. The system continually learns which approach works for which type of mind. China operates on a scale that makes Russians look like amateurs. The Great Firewall is a perceptual management platform for 1,400,000,000 brains. Analysis of leaked traffic shows that algorithms not only block, but actively inject alternative narratives with precise timing. When protests gain traction, systems automatically flood the space with a massive volume of distracting content. It's not about convincing people that the government is right. It's about increasing the cognitive cost of maintaining focus until brains simply give up. Harvard researchers analyzing 50 million posts identified that governments don't fear criticism as much as they fear coordination. Algorithms allow for fragmented critical discussions, but relentlessly suppress content, facilitating collective organization. AI detects not only keywords, but semantic patterns of mobilization in real time. The West is not an innocent observer. The most sophisticated algorithmic operation may be your Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube feed. Not necessarily controlled by governments, but they optimize for engagement, and brains engage more with anger and fear. MIT has shown that false information spreads 6 times faster than true information, not because bots amplify it more, but because humans share it more. Novelty and excitement activate reward circuits more intensely than factual accuracy. In a Stanford laboratory, an algorithm proposed a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that mathematical models indicate would be acceptable to 68% of both populations. No human negotiator came close to that rate. Why? The algorithm doesn't carry the trauma of the Holocaust, doesn't feel the humiliation of the Nakba, doesn't need to perform toughness for the electorate, doesn't have an amygdala firing tribal threat signals. It's just logic processing data, and that coldness may be exactly what salvation requires. A brutal paradox. Emotionless machines can demonstrate more effective compassion than humans whose brains have prioritized tribal loyalty for 200,000 years. An MIT system called Peacebuilder uses machine learning to identify mutually beneficial concessions that human negotiators ignore. Tested in the Dayton Accords, it identified 18 missed opportunities where both sides could have gained through trade-offs that no human considered because they required reframing outside of established mental categories. Project Carnegie Mellon developed Ethical Governor, an AI that not only optimizes outcomes but incorporates moral principles through learning aggregated human values. When applied to Gaza, it recommended strategies that no military command would adopt because they require accepting tactical risks to reduce long-term civilian suffering. Human commanders under pressure cannot make these calculations. AI can. Devastating question. If machines consistently choose more humane options than humans, who is truly more human? Global Cascades simulation on American supercomputers models Taiwan scenarios with frightening precision. It runs millions of iterations exploring how different choices produce outcomes ranging from peaceful reunification to nuclear war. In only 3% of scenarios does humanity avoid war and subjugation under purely human control. In scenarios where AI mediates negotiations, the probability of positive outcomes rises to 31%. Still not good, but it's an order of magnitude better. Both sides face the same reality. Human brains were not designed to manage the complexity of globally interdependent nuclear systems. The fundamental problem is that brains were formed in the Pleistocene to manage groups of 150 individuals. When modern politicians face crises, conscious processes in the prefrontal cortex construct rational narratives, but decisions are often determined by subcortical systems reacting like lions on the savannah, not abstract nuclear hazards. Neuroplasticity offers theoretical hope. Buddhist monks practicing meditation for decades show thickening in the medial prefrontal cortex and increased connectivity. They are able to generate genuine compassion for strangers and enemies, overcoming tribal programming. But this requires 10,000 hours of intensive practice. World leaders don't have that time. A radical possibility emerges, using artificial intelligence not to replace human judgment, but to expand moral capacity. Oxford has developed brain-computer interfaces that increase activation in empathy regions when users consider political decisions. Still experimental, but it works. Imagine a negotiator equipped with a system detecting when tribal processing dominates and redirecting attention to shared interests, or a population exposed to AI-generated narratives designed to activate cross-tribal empathy circuits. It's not mind control, it's cognitive prosthesis compensating for evolutionary limitations. Glasses are not a cheat for vision. They are technology correcting biological inadequacy. Ethical AI could be glasses for morality inadequate to the nuclear age. Resistance will be instinctive. The idea of machines influencing moral cognition activates fears of loss of autonomy. But consider the alternative. Without intervention, 200,000-year-old brains managing nuclear weapons produce a trajectory that simulations show ending in collapse. Natural neuroplasticity is very slow. Evolutionary selection would take thousands of generations. We don't have that time. AI offers a path to accelerated cognitive evolution, but only if we can overcome tribal resistance, trust systems without our biases, and accept that intelligence without tribal emotion can serve humanity better than intelligence imprisoned by it. The ultimate irony is that the decision to use AI to transcend limitations requires that we have already transcended them enough to trust the process. It's a paradox that can either trap us in destructive patterns until it's too late, or it can be a catalyst, forcing precisely the mental evolution that survival requires. You have just done something that most of the 7 billion humans on the planet will not do today, this week, or this year. You have confronted uncomfortable truths about how your own mind works, about neurological limitations we all share, about automated systems already making life or death decisions while you slept last night. The question is not whether this information is frightening. It is. The question is what you will do with this knowledge now that you can no longer deny it. Your prefrontal cortex is processing these words, but older structures in your limbic brain are already working to minimize the discomfort, to rationalize that these are problems distant from powerful people, that you as an individual have no agency in this system. This neural response is precisely the mechanism that perpetuates the patterns we explore. Recognizing this is not defeat. It is the first step toward cognitive transcendence. The uncomfortable truth that no world leader will publicly admit is that we are in a race between technological evolution and cognitive evolution, and technology is winning by a margin that increases exponentially each year. Military artificial intelligence develops capabilities in months that human doctrine would take decades to absorb. Disinformation algorithms learn your psychological vulnerabilities faster than you learn to defend against them. Autonomous systems compress decision cycles to milliseconds, while human neurons take 300 milliseconds just to register a visual stimulus. But within this asymmetrical race lies a rarely discussed opportunity. The same artificial intelligence that can amplify our worst tribal impulses can, if understood and consciously directed, compensate precisely for the evolutionary limitations that imprison us in destructive patterns. The difference between dystopia and transcendence may simply be how many people deeply understand these mechanisms. This is not abstract academic knowledge. It is an operational map of how power truly works in the 21st century, where decisive battles are fought not only on physical fields, but in the neural architectures of billions of people simultaneously. Every time you share content without verifying the source, every time you feel tribal anger and act impulsively, every time you discount existential risk because it is psychologically more comfortable, you are participating in a system that people with infinite resources have meticulously studied to manipulate. But awareness of these mechanisms creates space between stimulus and response, that critical interval where genuine freedom exists. You cannot control which algorithms exist, but you can train your mind to recognize when it is being manipulated. You cannot eliminate cognitive biases, but you can develop meta-awareness that identifies them in real time. We are building something different on this channel. It's not passive entertainment. It's not simplistic conspiracy theories attributing malice where there is often only unintended systemic consequence. It's not easy solutions to irreducibly complex problems. We are creating a community of people willing to confront reality in all its unsettling complexity, understand the neurological, geopolitical, and technological mechanisms that shape the future, and cultivate exactly the kind of strategic thinking that the coming years will demand. Each video is designed not only to inform, but to train cognitive patterns that automated systems cannot yet replicate. Genuine critical thinking, integration of contradictory perspectives, tolerance for ambiguity, and the ability to update beliefs based on evidence even when it is uncomfortable. If what you've read here has provoked something, intellectual restlessness, genuine curiosity, even defensive anger that might indicate something important has been achieved, then this is an invitation. Subscribe not to passively consume, but to actively participate in your own cognitive evolution. Turn on notifications because timing matters. Understanding geopolitical developments as they unfold, not weeks later, can be the difference between being shaped by events and having interpretive agency over them. Comment on your perspectives, especially when you disagree, because genuine collective intelligence emerges from diversity of thought, from non-conformity. Share with people you believe are ready for conversations that go beyond simple tribalism. We are literally at a historic moment where the next decade will determine the trajectories of centuries. You can observe passively, or you can be one of the human brains that understands enough to make a difference. Choose now.